Well, the Meghan and Harry interviews dominating all the news. In fact, it dominated the news for the week before it was actually broadcast, but very much dominating since Sunday when we first got those first clips coming out of the interview in detail. And we've seen those revelations, allegations, in particular, the two key allegations I think that everyone has been focused on. One is whether or not a senior member of the royal family made a racist comment about Meghan's unborn child Archie's skin and a concern about the colour of his skin. But also the idea that the fact that a couple were given no help when they were having mental health problems, particularly when Meghan says that she felt suicidal during her pregnancy, when she felt isolated and under attack by the British media and didn't get support from the family. Well, those are obviously personal issues for the family, but are there institutional and constitutional issues as well? Earlier in the show, Rupert Bell, our talkRADIO's political royal correspondent, has said this isn't a constitutional crisis as such, as with the abdication crisis or even Diana, but it is a question of the institutional reputation. So how much damage has it done to the institution of the British monarchy? Let's talk to Graham Smith. He's chief executive of Republic. They campaign for an elected head of state, and he joins us now. Good morning to you, Graham.
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning. Well, you could argue that actually all of this is helping to make your case for you. Everybody comes out of this looking bad for an awful lot of us. It's all a bit grubby and tacky, and no one comes out of this smelling of roses, in which case, aren't these younger royals doing your job for you?
Well, they're certainly helping. I mean, I think that, Harry and Meghan are not champions of the Republican or even the Democratic cause. I mean, they were quite happy being royal and seem a bit put out that their son wasn't going to be called Prince. So, I mean, my sympathy for them is muted, but I mean, there seems to be a considerable lack of sympathy right across the board from the public for all of them, on both sides of this kind of row, judging from a poll that came out yesterday, I think it was, from YouGov. What it does, I think, is get people to sit up and take notice of the royal family and go, hang on a minute, this isn't what I thought it was. And this is the one similarity with the Diana moment. I think that the reaction there when Diana died was that the behaviour of the royals was so at odds with the public perception of the Queen and the royals that everyone got quite upset about it. But once they started to fit that expectation or meet that expectation, then it all sort of subsided. This time is quite different because this isn't one person leaving the royal family. It's both. It's the couple leaving, and they are then turning around and firing both barrels back at the royals, and it's quite serious allegations that go to the heart of what the royal family is all about.
You said, I mean, look, there's no doubt at all this isn't a constitutional crisis in the sense, the abdication in the 1920s, or indeed the issue with Diana and Charles divorcing, the accusations about Charles, and big question marks about whether he was fit for the throne. I always found that fascinating that royalists would say, oh, well, we should just skip a generation and move straight to William. Rather not really understanding the principles of hereditary monarchy, which is you don't get to choose your monarch. They're just, it's an accident of birth. But there were question marks about whether Camilla could be his queen or his consort and the like. So there were issues there because he was the heir to and remains the heir to the throne. The issue with and even with Diana's death, question marks about how caring this family was. But as you said, as soon as the royal standard was lowered to half mast and the Queen gave a statement, and of course William and Harry forced, I mean, I think in frankly a sick way, to walk behind their mother's coffin to provide cover for Prince Charles. Then everyone was fine with the royal family again. Then it was a grieving family and everything was fine, and the rehabilitation of Prince Charles went on apace. This, though, involves, with all due respect to Harry, the spare. He ain't the heir, he's the spare. This goes from the hereditary principle goes, from it's Charles, it's William, and then it's William's three children before it gets to Harry. So he is, barring a horrific accident or crime, he's got no chance of coming to the throne. In which case, what does it matter if the spare decides to go to the other side of the world and marries a woman who complains that the royal family weren't very nice to her?
Well, that doesn't matter. I mean, the point is if they had left last year and just left, and that was the end of it,
and kept quiet,
then even made a few moans about how hard it all is living in the palace, that wouldn't have mattered. But they have turned around and blasted the actual senior royals with very serious allegations, and that is why it's an issue, because the criticisms, they have said to Oprah Winfrey apparently that it wasn't the Queen or Philip that are to blame for any of this. So that narrows it down quite considerably. And it's also the context in which all this is happening, because we've already had the whole scandal with Prince Andrew, which is not going to go away. We now have the Queen, who is 94. Her and Philip. Whatever you think about them, and everyone wishes them well, and no one wishes them harm or anything like that. But they're not going to be here at the end of the decade, and the monarchy is going to be drastically whittled down to King Charles and Prince of Wales William, whose brother is over in North America still making these complaints.
Yeah, but then that's where we do have these echoes, don't we, of the abdication, although it's the other way around. But this is the thing, a lot of people are saying all this criticism of Meghan, there's not so much criticism of Prince Andrew. And in fact, you could argue that's done far more damage to the institution of the monarchy, because at the end of the day, we know perfectly well that Prince Andrew at all times has been accompanied by his royal security personnel, and they would have been reported back to their seniors that he was spending time with a guy who was all rumours around, a convicted child sex trafficker, and he went and stayed at his house. It is absolutely untenable that anyone in the public eye should have a friendship with such a person. And yet, for some reason, either the royals didn't care about that, or weren't told about it when they darn well should have been. Someone has done something wrong. I mean, someone in the royal protection should have been sacked for not passing that information on. But the fact that there hasn't been such an outcry about that, a lot of people saying this is evidence, it's racism against Meghan, whereas really the issue is there is a debate about Meghan and Harry that happens in the media and in the public, but there isn't a debate about Prince Andrew. I don't know anyone who doesn't think that he's been wrong in his relationship and is wrong to not cooperate with the FBI. But the fact that the royal family just sort of stand him down from Trooping of the Colour and from royal photos of weddings, but they don't actually say you need to give evidence to the FBI and help them in this search to find justice for the victims of this child sex trafficker you were friends with. That says a lot more about the royal family, doesn't it, than whether or not they were nice to Meghan.
I think that, I think that the nice to Meghan maybe underplays it a little bit. I mean, this is a direct accusation of racist attitudes within the senior ranks of the royal family, and a negligence around her mental health. I mean, being in a position where you are considering self-harming that could be fatal is extremely serious, and you have to deal with it and take it seriously. And
is it the responsibility of the royal family?
Well, of course, it's the responsibility of everybody around someone who is in that position. But the royal family, this is part of the problem with the royal family, the nonsense of the monarchy, is that they can't separate out the family from the institution. Yeah. It is all wrapped up in one thing. And I agree with you on everything you said about Andrew, but what this does is throw a spotlight on all of that, because whenever there's been a scandal in the past, it's been us on the outside, them on the inside. They circle the wagons. They have all the secrecy around them. They just keep on muddying the waters and hoping everything goes away. On this, now we have two senior royals have walked away and opened up a whole can of worms about what's actually going on inside the palace, and it throws a massive spotlight back on Andrew, because it's like, well, if you're willing to throw Meghan under the bus and not willing to support her, and yet you are going to go out of your way to support Andrew. I mean, that is pretty appalling.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel that way. But again, we're all going to have views of the royal soap opera, and often when we talk about this in the media and when we talk about it in the pub, when remember pubs, everybody, we talk about it with our friends, we are often just talking about the soap opera. And for me, a lot of this is royal tittle tattle, and some of it's very sad. And the thought that any young woman, while pregnant with her first child, should feel so alone and so helpless is heartbreaking. I'm certainly not making light of it. I still think an awful lot of what she said is me, self-obsessed victim stuff, but that she can be that and also have suffered as well, and we know she suffered a miscarriage as well. But again, this is personal stuff rather than institutional stuff. Your concern is with the institution itself. I share a lot of your concerns on this front, on the basis that I believe we should, in the 21st century, we should be living in a country where the head of state is elected, and I'm sure the Queen, if she stood for election right now, would win that election. I don't think there'd be any fears on that front for them, but that the head of state should be someone chosen from one family seems to me to be a bizarre anachronism in a 21st century democracy. But do you think that all of this, I mean, given that the royal family has recovered from many scandals in the past, and bearing in mind, the abdication crisis wasn't the first crisis back in that time, but then you're into the crisis with Diana, with the divorce, and then with her death, and now with Meghan and Harry. Do you think that these things gradually gradually strip away the aura of the royal family, the sheen of the royal family, and that does undermine the institution? Or do you think that they'll get through this like they've got through everything else with a bit of good PR?
No, I mean, I think that without a doubt this is hugely damaging in the long term, because it's all in context. I mean, when in 1936, the abdication, that was all a done deal and a fait accompli before anybody in the public knew about it.
Yeah.
In 1997, they recovered. They had Tony Blair, who was a new and popular prime minister, rallying to their cause and giving them advice, saying, you have to go down to London and sort this out. And the Queen was 20-odd years younger and has had plenty of time to do whatever they do and put on all these big shows around weddings and jubilees. The fact that the Queen now is towards the end of her life and the end of her reign, the fact that King Charles is on the horizon. I mean, you said that the Queen would probably win an election. Maybe she would. I don't think the same is true of Prince Charles. And this is the point, is that a lot of these accusations, a lot of people are going to be thinking, well, what was it, King Charles? Was it Prince Charles that did this? Is he the one that's been saying these things? Is he the one that has been unpleasant to Meghan? Is that the sort of person we want? And the problem is the royals, they got this weird idea of don't complain and don't explain, and which is going to make it a lot harder for them to defend themselves, because if they've got a complaint, fine, tell us what it is.
Yeah.
But if there's an explanation that we want, then we deserve it and we want it and we want to know what's going on, because this is a public institution and it may be personal, but it raises a whole load of questions about the values that they represent and the standards that they are living by. And again, if a politician was being accused of this kind of relationship with their family and their in-laws and making racist comments and all the rest of it, they would not be re-elected. They would be out on their own.
And indeed, they would not be given such a soft soap interview. I mean, I've seen some soft soap interviews in my time, but again, the questioning and also the royal coverage, royal correspondents, as a general rule, act as if, frankly, they're fawning courtiers most of the time, rather than actually tough questions of people who are, to all intents and purposes, on the public payroll. Graham Smith, it's always really interesting to talk to you, Chief Executive of Republic. People are either cheering or shouting at the radio right now. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.